Hello, I'm Kimberly Dondo, Digital Content Manager, and welcome to In Conversation With, the podcast series that delves into the world of financial services and brings you face to face with some of the most notable figures in the industry. Listen as we discuss topics that are currently facing the industry and hear from visionary CEOs to disruptive innovators as we bring you a diverse array of voices and perspectives. We'll explore the challenges they faced, the lessons they've learned, and the insights they have to share about the ever-evolving landscape of financial services.
Hello, I'm Lois Vallely, Chief Reporter for Money Marketing, and on this episode, I'm joined by Jake Moeller, who is Senior Investment Consultant at Square Mile. Hi, Jake. Thank you for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here, Lois.
So maybe we could start off by you could introduce yourself to our listeners, say a bit about yourself, how you got into financial services, and why you joined Square Mile, in that order.
Okay. Jake Moeller, and I've got into financial services via a route in Australia. As you can tell from the accent, I do have an Australian heritage. I've been a fund selector and researcher now for in excess of 20 odd years, and I've known Richard Romerlee at Square Mile Research for some time, and I got the job here through him. So that's a little bit about me. My background's in economics and accounting and all that good stuff. And I play classical piano.
Nice. You want to say a bit more about that? Who's your favourite classical musician?
Chopin, Frédéric Chopin.
Nice.
I try to play as many pieces of his as I can, but financial services does take a lot of time, and music don't pay the rent.
True. Well, I actually, I know, do you know Lindsay Ricks at Canada Life?
Yes, I know of him, yes.
So she actually started off wanting to be a concert pianist, I think, and sort of started on down that route. And I thought it's interesting to then switch to financial services, but actually she explained it to me as she sort of likes the mathematics side of music more than the creative side. And I was like, okay, so yeah, mathematics, music, financial services, it does all sort of interlink in a way.
It is very closely related. Yeah.
Great. Well, okay. So the first thing I wanted to talk a bit about was what are some of the key challenges that you're seeing for financial advisors? What key challenges are they facing today, would you say?
Financial advisors have always been at the cold front of regulatory changes, haven't they? And I don't see this year being any different. Indeed, last year, consumer duty, RDR, what a change that was. SDR coming down the road. I think the impacts there, more of the onus is on fund managers, but financial planners have a lot on their plate, as well as seeing us through market volatility. They've got to deal with all the new regs. And keep their clients happy. It's a very tough job, and I've got a lot of respect for them. But I think the regs, getting your heads around the regulation and the amount of resources that they have to put into satisfying regulatory requirements, I think is not inconsiderable.
Yeah.
But
No, definitely. I did want to talk a bit about SDR actually, because obviously, with the rising importance of sustainability and people being a lot more focused on that nowadays, I would say it's a generalization, but I think it's the right one. Obviously, that sort of catapults ESG and responsible investing more into the mainstream. Would you say financial advisors are prepared for that from what you've seen?
Yeah, they're certainly they are certainly very interested in it. I think there was still a little bit of confusion out in the market. We send our advisor surveys out, and for want of trying, I don't think we've been the best industry at getting a consensual language around responsible investing, and that's made it a little bit more difficult to understand. But our advisor survey, I think, reported some 70% of our advisors within 3 years expected at least 50% of their business to be in responsible type products. So that's a fairly that to me shows that there is a grasp of what's going on out there. It's not just popular narrative; it is translating into fund flows.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And obviously, you just touched on it there, but the deadline for the implementation of the consumer duty is fast approaching. How do you think financial advisors are responding?
I sense that a lot of responses have been left last minute. And we've had a lot of queries from some of our financial advisors, to help them with it. And we have been helping them, but the management of the timeframes, there's always underestimating the time lags involved. I think it's easy to think that, you can do this very quickly. In actual fact, the kind of resources and training and understanding of the regs you have to get your heads around means there's a longer lead time into this than people think. So we were able to tee up quite a few specialists with some of the advisor groups we worked with and help them through it. But I would say in the main, it's been pretty well received, advisors are great at getting their heads down, getting things done, and then moving on to the next issue. So, I think that's in pretty good shape.
Yeah, it's like me at university, leaving my essay till the night before and then very much regretting it.
Yes. Well, it's just a rule in technical regulatory things always take longer.
Yeah, definitely.
Always, yeah.
I did want to talk a bit about both the advice gap and the advisor gap, which I know is something that's spoken about a lot in the advice space. Do you think we're any closer to closing the advice gap and therefore sort of getting more people into advice, or do you think there's still a long way to go there?
I think there's a bit of a way to go. It's interesting seeing my native Australia go through some reforms at the moment that are similar to the RDR reforms that we went through a few years ago. The whole concept of fee for service and moving away from commissions-based advice, I don't necessarily think was a good thing in all respects, because it did price out a lot of the smaller clients. And to this day, I think, there is still, I think it's clear that online advice is still has a way to go. And nothing encourages clients better than dealing with someone face to face. But unfortunately, advisors are under such resource-intensive requirements and demands on their time. I think there are still a number of clients or potential clients, small clients, younger clients, that are falling through the advice into the advice gap, and I think that's a bit of a shame.
Yeah,
we are where we are. I don't ever see us moving back to a commission structure again, but it did have some advantages in that an advisor could get something out of advising a smaller client. That's not the case now. So
yeah, no, I was having a conversation about that the other day, and the fact that quite often banks used to have more advisors and offer advice to potentially clients with smaller pots, and then
yes, and a lot of that would be. Yeah, and a lot of that would be tied products, so it wouldn't be whole of market, and and I think for smaller clients that's okay, and then as their pot grows, they can then, get more sophisticated advice, and that's a model which in Australia has been quite popular, but then it's been bedeviled by fraudulent advisors and lack of supervision. So that there are always problems with any type of model that comes out. So I don't know whether we've got it quite right yet, but I certainly think we're getting better at it.
Yeah. And one thing I've been looking into quite a lot recently and speaking about is artificial intelligence and whether that will help at all. Because obviously there was robo-advice sort of didn't fully work, but from what I've heard from speaking to people, but potentially sort of hybrid advice and AI might help close that gap a bit.
It might. I've had a play with ChatGPT, and it's interesting. I think sometimes it can give you a good technical response without quite standing context, and until you every single client has a slightly different context, and you can get them to fill out questionnaires and put them into different risk buckets and so on and so forth. But there's always a slight calibration that I think only a human can adjust to. I'd be surprised if that is the answer. But early days.
It is, yeah, early days, and people are talking about ChatGPT. Obviously, it's still in fairly early stages of development. I've also had a play around with it, and we're sort of talking about it in a journalist context as well, because obviously there was all that talk about AI stealing people's jobs, and it was as relevant for a journalist as for a financial advisor. But I'm not worried, because I wrote a feature for our May issue, and I asked ChatGPT to write the intro to it so I could compare the two intros, and I would say mine was much better. So I'm not worried for my job yet. However,
no, well, the Irish Times has been stung, hasn't it, with that article that was submitted and written by AI.
I know. Well, and also it's a bit out of date, I think, because it only, from what I've been told, it only has information up to the end of 2021. So it just discounts anything from 22 onwards.
Yeah, I'm always careful of false prophets. I'm not scared of it. I've had a play with it. I embrace technology, and most of us do in this industry. It's a tech heavy industry, and I think you've got to embrace these things rather than fear for them.
Yeah, definitely. However, you only have to look at how quickly the iPhone developed to realize how quickly these sorts of things can develop. And
well, that's right. The quiz night has long been corrupted by this technology. So, AI could end it totally,
wiping us all out. Let's hope not. Yes. So moving on, what would you say are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the industry since you joined, in the advisor space, in the investment world?
Without a doubt, it's responsible investing. That, to me, I joined the industry in early 1990s. This has been a sea change in the way we think, in the way that we talk about investing, the practical implications, the paths that it opens up, the opportunities it presents for clients, for fund managers, for advisors. It's an absolute sea change. It's as big as anything that I've been involved in. And, I was there when the millennium bug was the big thing. This is big, and it's still evolving. And it's very, very interesting. So we've really got to grapple with it. And I think the fact that, ESG funds and responsible investing has had a challenge on performance after a good run has also tested the mettle. And I think when you start seeing responsible investing become a political issue, as you have in the States, and there's also, there's a big, in Australia, I was there recently, and they're shutting down some of the coal-fired power stations, which is causing all sorts of practical increases in electricity charges for the consumers. And they ask questions about what it all means. We are really reaching that pivotal point now where things are happening, and they're having material effects on us as consumers, not just the way we invest money, but the way we spend money and the way we have to spend money. So, this issue is great. It's interesting. Is it a force for good? Absolutely. But are there more teething difficulties ahead? I think there are, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's interesting. Before I joined money marketing, I wouldn't really have even thought about investment as being, I think, probably where you invest your money is one of the biggest changes you can make to become more sustainable and help tackle climate change. And I don't think it's really spoken about as much as, so I used to write about energy companies and water companies, but the energy companies particularly, they were talking about this just all the time, and the shift to a more like net zero economy. I just don't think it's spoken about as much. Even in the time I've been at money marketing, which has been nearly 2 years now, it's very much ramped up, I would say, in my experience. People seem to be speaking about it more, and it seems to be on the agenda a lot more for people. And it's definitely, it's interesting.
It is interesting. I think, again, there've been a few, I think there have been some, cynical attempts to market products incorrectly, and the FCA has probably been right to sort of prevent greenwashing. But I think the fact that once upon a time, this was an issue that was only discussed in the trade press, and then rarely. But now you see it in the nationals, you see it on the television, and then that creates a virtuous circle of knowledge, doesn't it? So I see journalists now also being more akin to gatekeepers in the way that they keep fund managers to account, they hold fund managers to account. They attend AGMs more readily to see what's going on from a sustainability perspective. So there is certainly this virtuous circle of learning that we're all undergoing, and slowly the tide is rising. I think we're all becoming better actors.
Yeah, certainly hope so. Just finally then, what one piece of advice would you give to someone looking to break into this industry? Financial services, financial advice, investment world?
I'm still learning a lot from going to things. Just go to anything you're invited to, Lois.
I do.
Well, as you should. That's why you're becoming such a well-networked journalist, because that's how you get opportunities to meet people with different views, to supplement your technical knowledge that you've learned from university. Financial services still is and will remain, I think, a person's game, right? You've got to know people. Now, we can't all go to Oxford and Cambridge. I'm Australian. I don't know anything about the British class system. It hasn't helped me at all. But what has helped me has been going to events, going to the pub, going to meet people after work, and being curious. A lot of sales pitches, go to them. People think going to see a fun sales pitch is a bad thing. They're trying to sell me. Go to it, because you'll learn something, and that salesperson will one day become your friend or become someone who can help you in your career. So that would be my advice, is that the way that I've got ahead is not necessarily by knowing stuff, because there's a lot of stuff I don't know, but it's been by knowing people and being curious.
Great. Yes, definitely. I would echo that. Lovely. Okay, well, I think that's all we've got time for this episode, but thank you very much for joining me, Jake. I've really enjoyed chatting with you today.
It's been a pleasure, Lois. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for listening to In Conversation With. We do hope that you enjoyed it. Please do keep up to date with all our new releases via Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your podcasts from. You can also keep up to date with all our new content published on the Money Marketing website, as well as our print edition Money Marketing magazine. So make sure to subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. See you next time.